All right, welcome into this fresh edition of the Hoist the Colors podcast. I'm Stephen Igoe, joined by Maceo Donald, former ECU football player, and now an analyst covering the football team with Hoist the Colors. Also, maybe some new ventures on the horizon. We'll get into
Oh
maybe
yeah.
at a later date. Maceo, we kind of took last week off, but that we're that much closer to camp now. The report date is tomorrow. And all of a sudden, man, we're almost done with these position previews, and it's almost time for some football, man. It's preseason camp time.
Yeah, definitely went by quick this off season for sure. Usually it goes by kind of slow, in summer workouts and just kind of grinding those days out. But it definitely came around quick. But I'm ready for some college football for sure.
It's crazy, man. And the teams that start week 0, they've already started practicing, because they got
Yep.
games like Notre Dame and Navy. They play week
Mhm.
0, and in Dublin, Ireland, they've been practicing about a week now.
Yeah.
Today we're doing the linebacker preview. We'll get into that here shortly. A lot of new faces to talk about, and also some guys who have been waiting their moment, who have been in the program, specifically Taylor Jackson, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Is it Twitter or X now, Maceo? Like, what is
I don't know.
going on here, man?
I have no idea. I was having trouble finding the app like for a few days. I was like, "What? Where's Twitter?" I was trying to find it on my phone, and I forgot they changed, the symbol and everything. But getting it figured out. It's still Twitter though.
Are you using Threads at all?
I was, but I think that kind of dies down pretty quick. It's basically another Twitter, so I
Yeah.
don't need two of them. I already got one.
Yeah, we'll roll with Twitter. We created a Threads for HTC, but
Yeah,
I think I tweeted something the first day all this was going down. I mean, whether it's called X, Twitter, whatever, I'm still going to call it Twitter probably.
for sure.
But as long as it's formatted the same and we can get our coverage out there, we'll continue to use it. Who knows how long that'll be possible? But anyway, so we've looked at a lot of this team already, Maceo. And we're going to talk linebackers here in a second. By the way, if you got comments, questions, drop them. We already got a couple here from Mr. Juan's World. We'll get to in a little bit. But preseason camp starting on Wednesday as far as practice. Now, report date is tomorrow. Maceo, you've been in this a long time. You had several report dates you went through. Take us through what happens on report date. Is it just getting to know your teammates, reporting, getting your early starting your playbook? What goes into that? And then the early days of camp. What is this process like for an ECU football player?
Yeah, essentially it's all of that. Report date. You just kind of get everyone's getting back into town, do a little bit of conditioning, and just kind of get those pre-camp meetings, just going over how the coaches want everything to run for these next few weeks, and just really getting to know everyone and getting the installs for practice on Wednesday. So it's a lot of just preparation and just getting to know everybody and everyone getting in that groove and the mindset of what camp takes.
So camp, the early days, like I look at it from a reporter standpoint. Like the early days are fresh, they're fun.
Yeah,
You're excited. Like the first few days, you're out there, and then like I don't know, you kind of hit this lull, like a weekend. What is it
yeah.
like as a player? Like, do y'all just ever get tired of it? Like, it's got to be a grind after a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a grind. It's really not even the practices and everything because that's what we love to do. We love to go out there and play football and just compete with our teammates. But it's definitely a grind. Waking up in the morning, have breakfast, meetings, special teams, position meetings, and then going out to practice. And how we've usually done it after we get a little break, have lunch for a couple hours, come back, watch the practice film, and then we'll have a walkthrough usually pretty much every day later in the day and have some more meetings. So it's really a grind, and a lot of guys they'll bring their sleeping mats and everything into the locker room and just kind of hang out there. But it's definitely a grind, but it's also fun, and just you get to be around your teammates for a few weeks straight with no distractions, and you really get to hone in on everything and just prepare for the season.
So an average day, is it starting at like what 6, 7 a.m. and going
Yeah.
till late at night?
Probably around 6:30. You're walking in the building, getting some treatment and getting breakfast, and then we'll probably leave around 8:30, 9 o'clock. Traditionally, that's how we've done it. So about after that walkthrough, everyone's kind of getting tired and hot and ready to go to sleep. So once you get home, you're really just falling right to sleep and doing the same thing the next day.
It is a grind. I always see y'all, the athletes as y'all get closer, share like the Instagram posts of what the schedule is like. Because
Yeah.
basically at that point, your life is over for about a
Yep.
month. It's
Yeah.
just camp. Like I guess y'all get Sundays off from practicing, but y'all probably still have to do some
Yeah.
film recovery work. So it's just it's a month, basically a month just of workouts and training, getting ready for the season, because that's how you have to do it, man. Everybody else is doing it, so if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind come week 1, especially this year going to Michigan. So at least you do
Yeah.
have some motivation, Maceo, if you're on
Yeah.
the team.
Yeah, for sure. Those Sundays are the best days. We all look forward to Sundays. You get to go to church and get the word. So you definitely need it going into that next week because usually that second week is where you hit that wall and a lot more hitting and a lot more physicality. So you definitely need that church service on Sunday for sure.
No doubt, no doubt. A little prayer never hurts for sure. All right, let's get into this position preview again. We'll have camp coverage starting on Wednesday. We're going to talk to Mike Houston on several days, not every day, but we'll talk to Mike Houston after most practices as camp goes along. We'll see if we can get Maceo out there in the coming weeks to reunite with his former teammates, and
Yeah.
who knows, maybe he'll put the pads on one more time and catch some passes. All right, we're talking linebackers today. We got a good question from Mr. Juan's World. He says, can we get a refresher on the position rooms in our 4-2-5 defense? We have a hybrid defensive end outside linebacker. Is that the pirate and a hybrid linebacker safety? He says, is that the bandit? Which room are each of those hybrid positions in? So from my understanding, so you got the rush, which is the stand-up outside linebacker position. That is in the basically the defensive outside linebacker room, which is coached by Tim Dowse. We talked about that last week, Maceo. That's the position Jeremy Lewis, Jack Powers, those guys play. And then the hybrid safety is has historically been the Sam linebacker position, which is like where Gerard Stringer has played. Jira played it previously. I know he played more safety last year. So in the past, this has been a room under Trip Weaver, who is the safeties coach. I want to say this offseason, Maceo, and you may or may not know, I've seen a lot of these guys working with Blake Carroll or like going to, the position meeting dinners with Blake Carroll. So they may have shifted that to more of a linebacker role. And I've heard they're going to introduce more of a nickel position in addition to, kind of this Sam. So I think they're going to become even more multiple. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, but just when you were with the team, what did you notice kind of about that safety hybrid role?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much can put a lot of different guys there. And like you said, it's definitely a hybrid role for sure because, Gerard Stringer could really do both. He was more that coming down and he'll definitely smack you in the face. And Jira Wilson, he could do both as well, even though he primarily played safety last year. But yeah, I think the Nichols and Sams, they're usually with Coach Weaver too. But this year, I'm not really sure what they're going to do. But that's the good thing about, that defense and Coach Harrell. They mix it up a lot. You really never know what you're going to get on any given week. And, a lot of different blitzes from safeties, a lot of different blitzes from the nickels. So it's very different. And you really can't just, kind of just sit there and expect what they're going to do because you really never know.
And that's why they recruit so many safety type bodies, is so they can just like shift those guys around. Like even like Tegan Wilk can come down and play the Sam.
Yeah.
So you got guys you can kind of mix and match depending on if you get some injuries. Jordan Huff, who's coming back from injury, he's a guy who could slot in the Sam or nickel this year. And I don't really know how they're going to do it, but I've just heard they're going to try and get a little more pass defense friendly and kind of introduce more of a true nickel back in certain situations. And I think you could see a guy like Huff there, and outside of your Sam linebackers who we'll talk about here in a minute. So today we are talking about the Sams. We're talking about the Mike and the Wheel, which is are the traditional inside linebackers in Blake Harrell's scheme. And let's get into it, Maceo. Well, first off, let's talk about, before we talk about this year's personnel, some significant losses from last year. Guys you know well, Xavier Smith, who played at ECU, I believe, 5 years.
Yeah.
Miles Berry, longtime ECU player as well. Chance Bates was a transfer, but he was a quality player in his lone year at ECU. So some significant guys to replace for sure.
Yeah, definitely. All those guys were fifth-year guys, so we came in the same year. Specifically, Miles Berry and X, and even Gerard Stringer, we all came in the same year, even though Gerard missed a year because of Achilles. But you're definitely losing a lot of production there too. Big leaders on the team, real physical guys. They're really the guys when they talk, everyone listens. So it's definitely some big shoes to fill, but I definitely think we have the guys in the room like Taylor Jackson who are going to fill those shoes and kind of make a name for himself.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I'm looking over this, and we went over the projected depth chart a little bit prior to the show, Maceo, and basically, with the transfers added and the guys coming back, you've got a senior and a junior or two juniors as the top guys at each of these three positions. So
Yeah.
you're inexperienced, but you're still pretty old.
Hmm.
And to me, that starts with Taylor Jackson because he's a junior. The casual fan probably doesn't know his name,
Right.
but this is a guy who has been since his true freshman year involved in defense, involved in special teams. This is his time. This has got to be Taylor Jackson's year, right?
Yeah, definitely. Taylor, like you said, Taylor, I mean, if you're not really paying attention too well in the details, you wouldn't recognize that he's really out there some plays. But Taylor definitely has played on defense since he was a true freshman and got some time there. And, it can be kind of hard when you're playing behind, a few old heads and then you get another old head transfer who was kind of a plug and play guy who, you knew what you were going to get from him. But this is definitely his time now. And I think he got the chance to learn from all those guys these past few years. And, he's really going to step up this year. And I don't know if any fans are watching, watch the bowl game from this past year. He made a lot of big plays against Coastal in our bowl game because I believe X didn't play in that game. So really, he really had an opportunity there. And I think that was just a little snippet of what he's going to do this season.
Yeah, and I think he brings some explosiveness, some good speed to the linebacker position. I
Yeah.
thought in the spring, Macy, I don't know when the last time you saw Taylor in person was, but I thought he looked noticeably bigger, man. He,
Yeah.
he is he has grown a lot since he first got here.
Yeah, definitely. All those guys are. You got to be big to play in those trenches, man. That you got to be.
Yeah, especially with the way Mike Houston wants his defense to be playing,
Yeah.
downhill, physical. So Taylor Jackson, a junior, I expect him to play. The other guy who was kind of running with the first team at the opposite linebacker spot in the spring was Michael Edwards, the third. He came in as a Georgia Southern transfer last year and kind of played Sam and some linebacker, played a ton of special teams. I think he played like 280 special team snaps
Yeah.
and graded out really well according to Pro Football Focus. So this is another guy, Maceo, who took a big leap this offseason, it seems like. What did you see from Mike last year in his first year on campus, and what do you expect from him this year?
Yeah, I think Mike is one of those hybrid guys too, where he could still play that Sam nickel position and even play some of the Mike and Will as well. He's an upperclassman as well, so he's definitely has some experience and kind of knows how everything goes. And I think just like Taylor, it was a good learning experience for him last year too, just being behind some guys like Mosberry and Xavier Smith who can kind of show them the ropes and really teach them the defense and how Coach Harrell wants to run it. So I definitely think Mike will have a big impact this year. And he made a lot of plays last year too on special teams, but also on defense. So I think we'll just see more of that.
Yeah, really excited about both those guys, and
Yeah.
I think they, maybe even add a little. They may not be as big as X were and as Chance Bates were, but they may add a little bit more versatility.
Mhm.
Pass coverage, which we know ECU struggled at times last year. So we'll see how that transpires going forward. All right, two big transfers they brought in at the inside linebacker position. BJ Davis from South Carolina State. He was a HBCU All American last year. He was an All MEAC first team selection, had 94 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss. The biggest thing that stands out to me, Maceo, BJ Davis had 5 picks and 7 pass breakups as an inside linebacker. 6'2". I've heard he's up to 220, 225 right now. So really long arms. And I
Yeah.
think what you're seeing here is this guy, and they also added Taekwon King. Might as well introduce him as well as I pull up his bio. He transferred in from North Carolina
A&T.
A&T. He's another big kid, 6'3", 215, all Big South Conference selection, 94 tackles. So, again, both these guys have played a lot at the FCS level. There is a big jump to FBS, but I think the biggest thing is you're adding more length. I think this was done by design because of the pass coverage struggles last year.
Right.
Have you heard anything about BJ or Taekwon, and just kind of what do you think they'll bring to the table?
I think those guys, if you had to compare it to anybody, I think, kind of what we expect them to do is kind of similar to Chance Bates, where they're guys who are experienced and can kind of plug and play. But like you said about BJ, they seem like maybe a little bit more athletic, long arms, where they can kind of get in those passing lanes as well. So I definitely think that's a big thing for our defense, especially since we struggled at times, like you said, pass defense. So I think those guys will be perfect fits, really, and can kind of help some of the younger guys like Taylor, even though Taylor's been in the program longer, it's still an experience thing, and that does matter at some points. But definitely guys you can just plug in and play immediately.
And I like too that obviously I think you ideally want guys who have been in your program to step up and win the job like Taylor,
Yeah.
but they did lose some linebackers in past years who are depth pieces. So you got to bring in more quality depth to kind of create that competition to make everybody better. I feel like these moves do that. They showed last year they're willing to rotate 3-4 guys at
Yeah.
linebackers. So I think all these guys can play. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they transition to the FBS level. It's a much quicker game, but I do like BJ Davis. He can really play in space. He's long. I think he'll definitely find a role on this team. All right, a couple more inside linebackers, then we'll jump to the Sam. Zakai Barker is a guy that I love coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Undersized Maceo, but I think he led Georgia, the state, in tackles as a freshman and sophomore and junior in high school, which says a lot. And unfortunately, injured his knee, missed all last year, but in the spring game, he led the team with 10 tackles in his first spring game. So, what do you know about Zakai? Seems very, team oriented. Seems like a really good dude. I know he's really smart. What do you know about Zakai coming back from injury?
Yeah, first off, Zakai, he's a great dude. I got to know him a lot more just being in the locker room and just kind of meeting him just through his ACL struggles and just getting treatment and going through that. And he probably had one of the best attitudes for somebody who's going through a serious injury like that. But like you said, he had a great high school background in the state of Georgia, and I think he's going to be a good guy. I mean, he is, like you said, short, a little bit shorter, still a strong guy, but a guy that'll come down and hit you and is very coachable and can learn a lot.
He kind of reminds me of Aaron Ramsor, just in terms of like undersized, but going to go out and make a ton of tackles. Now I think he's got even higher upside, but I think to me, like when ECU plays Navy, I just feel like Zakai's going to go in there and just rack up like 20 tackles.
Right.
He just seems like that type of dude. Jamari Young's another young linebacker, came in as a walk-on, but I've heard really good things. This dude, I mean, he looks like he's built like a tank. I would not want to run into him in the open field. Do you know much about Jamari?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the same thing. He's a younger guy, just needs some experience, just needs that, old head kind of guidance for him. Like you said, a walk on. So I know he has a chip on his shoulders, like reminds me of myself in that manner, just having a chip on your shoulder and knowing you got to go get and earn everything that you want. So I think, just walk ons in general kind of have a somewhat of a different mindset of just got to be able to go get it and be able to do your job and be coachable. But I think for him, it just starts off getting some special teams reps and showing the coaches that, he's committed to the team and is willing to do whatever he has to do to get on the field.
He will be a redshirt freshman this year, as will Zakai. So both those guys have 4 years of eligibility remaining. Again, three incoming freshmen in the linebackers. We're going to count Greg Turner as a Sam, which we'll talk about here. He's out of Atlanta. But DJ Johnson, whose uncle is Derek Johnson, who played for the Kansas City Chiefs, was a great linebacker there. His dad also played in the NFL. He's a young guy to Georgia. I expect to play as his career moves forward. Julian Davis, another linebacker out of Georgia. Both those guys really talented, but they're freshmen, so you just don't know what to expect in their first semester of football. But those are a couple names to keep an eye on, as well as Brady Blaylock, who's a walk-on linebacker too. So let's transition to the Sam. Again, we talked about Gerard Stringer. Man, he was so good last year. I mean, he was. I still remember him flying around that bowl game doing everything defensively. So replacing him is not going to be easy, but I do like the talent here. The two guys who ran here in the spring were North Carolina transfer Ra Dilworth, 4.4 speed, was a big-time recruit out of high school. UNC could not really find a home for him. I feel like ECU has at this position. And the other guy was Kingston McKinstry, who has been in the program now, former transfer from the JUCO ranks who struggled with injuries but had a healthy spring and looked good. So what do you expect from this position, Maceo, with Ra and Kingston?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty much open for whoever kind of wants to take it. And like you said, we do sub a lot and have a lot of transitioning on our defense. So, I mean, either of those guys could get a lot of playing time this season. Like you said, Kingston has struggled with injuries for, the past few seasons. And, he's a guy I still remember, kind of one of the first practices going against him. And he'll definitely come down and hit you right in the face, which is something you needed, that Sam position, along with being able to cover. And I think Ra speed kind of is something that we need in the secondary and someone that can just fly around the field and make some plays.
How difficult is it when you were playing running back in practice, Maceo? Like when they bring the Sam blitzes, it's coming from the second level of the defense. Is it hard to identify? Is it hard to pick up those blitzers because I feel like Ra with his speed should be able to be pretty elite at that, because he'll have the ability to make up closing ground quickly and maybe get there from the second level that normally maybe that guy doesn't get home.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we do a good job of trying to protect the quarterback and kind of have a good scheme going. So most of the time you kind of knew if you were going to end up on one of those guys, but it's sometimes it can be a little bit easier because they might try to run around you than just to run through you, like a middle linebacker might would do. But I mean, it's definitely hard. And Gerard was one of those really physical, very, very aggressive guys that would hit you in the face, but could still try to run around you and make some plays. But I definitely think speed, regardless of where it is on the field, is definitely a necessity, and something that you can be very versatile with.
I do feel like this group is going to have maybe more speed at linebacker than maybe
Mm.
ECU in the past has had. It's just, it almost feels like they've gotten more athletic, but maybe they're not as big, or at least they
Right.
have kind of options there, Maceo. So, what do you think maybe about that dynamic? I think this. Look, we all know the run defense was very good last year. You don't want to take too much away from a strength. You still want to be good versus the run. But,
Right.
to be at the team they want to be defensively, you got to be better versus the pass. You got to have balance. So, what do you think maybe? Do you feel like that played a role in kind of the philosophy this offseason as far as adding some of these guys, via the portal and also, adding to the new room or new guys to the room?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And, not to say we didn't have any speed before, but you can definitely see a change. A few guys there that have a little bit more speed and maybe a little less power than we're used to having. But like you say, you can't teach speed. And, you can always use that, whether it's on the offense and defensive end, you can always use speed. But definitely, I think that because of some of the struggles that we've had in the past defense, that you want to, kind of, change that, especially. And we do have a lot of guys returning on the defensive line. So I think that's something that the coaches are probably expecting we have another good season, or a rush defense. But I definitely think something to improve is the pass defense. And I would say speed is definitely one thing to help that in length as well.
No doubt. And we'll see if any of these guys kind of get moved around as camp opens Wednesday. Always know just going out to practice, there's always a guy or two that's in a spot that maybe I didn't expect them to be in. So
Right.
looking forward to seeing how that transpires. And you can kind of maneuver these guys between, will linebacker to Sam to boundary safety. You see a lot of movement there with the multiplicity of this defense, Maceo. So guys can line up all over the place. You got
Yeah.
certain personnel packages. And I just feel like as we go through this, and I know I've talked about the DBs at length this offseason just because there have been so many changes. I think this coaching staff is going to have as many or more options than they've ever had. Like as far as, hey, all right, we need to play the run here. Let's go with these guys. Hey, we need to play the pass. I just like the versatility of kind of what this depth chart looks like. Again, the problem is you just maybe don't have that FBS experience, but I think that the talent and depth is there. Just your thoughts on kind of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that the speed is something that's very important, and size is something that's very important as well. We're playing some of those teams traditionally we've played the past couple of years, like Houston and UCF and Cincinnati, who aren't in the conference, but you're still bringing in teams like UTSA, that will have that size up front, and we'll have those people that you really need to stop the run and have very mobile quarterbacks as well. But I think you can kind of kill two birds with one stone in a way, kind of have that speed to go run around and still have that speed to get around some bigger guys. So I definitely think that it's probably good additions that we've got these guys like Ra that came in from Carolina. And we still have Taylor Jackson, who's kind of a smaller guy who's been in the program as well, who can kind of show the other guys that, we're a little bit of different players, but this is still how we want to play.
And we'll find out how just what the plan is going to be, or how it's going to work out, starting with that opener against Michigan, who
Yeah.
they will line up and come downhill right at you,
Yes.
unlike most teams on the schedule. All right, Robert has a question. He says, were there more times versus mobile quarterbacks that the D line was not stunning but keeping pass/rush lanes closed with more of a straight D line rush? Basically, you weren't in on the defensive huddles, but I feel like that is like pretty standard thing. If you're worried about a guy escaping the pocket, beating you with his legs, you do have to stay, keep that rush lane integrity.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that's something they hit on, and so many quarterbacks now are mobile. You have to
Mhm.
find that balance. You can't just go straight rush every time. So I don't
Right.
know how much you had to deal with that on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of always think when you think about a Russian quarterback, I always think about, Charleston Southern a couple years ago and kind of how we played those guys. And
Yeah.
he ended up transferring to NC State, that quarterback, and mainly because of what he could do on his feet. But I mean, it's hard to guard running quarterbacks either way, really, in today's age because they're so fast, and a lot of them can throw the ball as good as they can run as well. So I mean, I think it's just about keeping them in the lanes and forcing them back to the linebackers in the middle of the field because regardless if it's a running quarterback or a running back or a receiver, if they get to the outside, that's not good for anybody. So I think the biggest thing is just forcing it back into where your help is.
All right, there is your answer, Robert. Appreciate the question. Again, if you got any more questions, get them in. We're about to wrap up here as we get through the linebackers. That was it, Maceo. Quick and easy.
Yeah,
Because next week, we got
it'll
the
be long.
DBs, and it could be, we could really split it into corners and safeties and do two separate shows, but
Yeah,
we'll just knock them all out at once.
yeah,
We'll go DBs, and we'll have like 40 guys to talk about.
yep.
But it's all good. All right, before we let you get out of here, favorite ECU linebacker ever? Do you need me to go first, or do you have a guy in mind?
Yeah, you can go first. You can go first.
All right. All right. So, favorite ECU linebacker. I don't know if I can pick just one, but Pernell Griffin in the 90s when I was a little kid, he wore 47. He had the neck, the little neck pad thing that makes linebackers look so beast, in my opinion. And he was an absolute stud. Really like watching him play in Steve Logan's time. Quentin Cotton, probably the most underrated ECU linebacker ever. He was on the Skip Holtz teams. They started the year 3-0. He blew out his knee at Tulane. That defense was never the same. He was a beast. Quentin Cotton, probably my favorite ECU linebacker of all time. And I'm trying to think more recently if anybody really jumps to mind. There have been some good ones like Nate Harvey, even though he was more of like an outside
Yeah,
linebacker DN. He was a stud
yeah,
that one year.
yeah.
All right, Maceo, you're up. No pressure here. No pressure. You might have to pick your friends, but let's hear it.
Yeah, I'll go a throwback and I'll say some more recents, but I remember, coming on visits kind of maybe like as a freshman or sophomore in high school, and I remember a guy, his name was Zeke Bigger, and this dude was just huge, and I thought his name was funny because I'm like, is his last name, really Bigger?
Right.
But I always remember he had the neck pad, and it kind of always stuck with me. So that's kind of my older head, but current guys, I would just have to say guys that came in my class, Gerard Stringer, Miles Berry, and Xavier Smith. Those guys are, very close. I'm very close to those guys, and they always play with a lot of passion and energy. And they kind of inspired me trying to go out and hit some guys. On special teams, sometimes I had the chance, but I love those guys, and they brought a lot and did a lot for the program. And those guys are some guys that played as true freshmen as well, so they were really out in the field when we were 3-9 for a couple seasons in 2018, 2019, and just seeing them mature and seeing them be leaders of the defense and just leaders of the team, especially Gerard Stringer coming back from a big Achilles injury. So I have a lot of passion and love for those guys, and I still talk to them on a daily basis.
No doubt, Gerard. Coming back from that injury, like that's probably the ACL's bad, but Achilles, people don't talk about enough how tough
Yeah,
that is to come back from, and he
yeah,
came back better,
yeah,
which says a lot. I still remember Xavier catching passes versus UConn as a
yeah.
freshman, so
He should have scored. He should have
he
scored a
should
touchdown.
have, yeah. But that was fun times, man. He ended up playing the position he was meant to play later
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
So yeah, I remember Gerard. I remember Miles playing as freshman. All those guys, yeah, that was crazy times as true freshmen. So
yeah,
good class there. Zeke Baker, by the way, great name. I'm ashamed of myself for not remembering him off the top of my head, just because he was in that interview vein where like he also he gave us great quotes. He could
yeah,
talk on the field, off the field. Great dude and perfect name. He also wore 44, which is a really cool linebacker number. So he
yeah,
had like the whole linebacker package going. So
yeah.
yeah,
He
he's a
did.
good one for sure. Jay says, love watching Zeke play on kickoff coverage. Scott says Quentin Cotton was his favorite. Scott also says, not a question, but just wanted to thank you and Maceo for breaking it down for us. Also to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks, Scott. He helps us out on our baseball podcast. So good episode, Maceo. We knocked it out in exactly 30 minutes, man. So this
Yeah.
was short, sweet, to the point. I'm ready for camp now.
Yeah, I know, right? It's right around the corner, literally. Got about 48 hours till they're going to be hitting somebody. So I know they're excited, and I'm excited too.
No doubt. I'm ready to roll. Well, Maceo, thanks as always for the time, man. We'll be back sometime next week. We'll try to knock out the DBs, and then we'll be done with the positional previews because I'm still not doing special teams.
Me neither. That's cool.
All right, that's Maceo Donald. I'm Stephen Igoe. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast. We'll talk to you guys later this week. Again, we'll have camp coverage for you, hoistthecolors.net. Check it out starting on Wednesday morning. We'll have that for you come then. This has been the Hoist the Colors podcast. We'll talk to you next time.